Who is Dr. Vegapunk? What does he look like? And how is he 6 robots? There are very few characters in One Piece as interesting and mysterious as Dr. Vegapunk. The reason I started my YouTube channel was to get out my theory on who inspires Dr. Vegapunk. And at this point in the arc, only 2 chapters in, I'm almost certain that this is going to be true. The mystery behind the identity of Dr. Vegapunk is almost as compelling as the One Piece itself. And needless to say, I think I cracked it. I'm not only going to give you a breakdown of who I think inspired Vegapunk, but how this person will lead to Vegapunk's story arc in the future, confirming that Dr. Vegapunk is the character with the eye patch that Oda has been holding off ever since the start of One Piece. If you recognize him on the thumbnail, you recognize him and you know who it is, but for those who don't, I'm going to explain everything that led to me coming up with the theory that this man will be the one who inspires Dr. Vegapunk. It's only fitting that one of the greatest scientists in the One Piece world would be inspired by one of the greatest scientists in fiction. And if Vegapunk is indeed inspired by this character, it's likely that Vegapunk's fate in the story is set in stone. This theory was the reason I started my YouTube channel, and seeing that we're already on Vegapunk's island right now, I know that this is my final stand to prove that this theory is fact. For this video, I'll be rethinking my original Vegapunk theory with the newly revealed information from Vegapunk's island and his presence in the story so far. With these snippets of Egghead, there's only been more fuel to fire my theory, and I'll be talking about this theory more and more as the arc continues. If you enjoy this video or any of the ideas I say in this video, consider supporting the channel. And with that all out of the way, let's get right into it. Before I talk about who I think Vegapunk is going to look like, why don't we look at Vegapunk's appearances in One Piece so far. There's the iconic shot of him looming over Kuma with his gloves, and a shot of him completely covered in shadow on Punk Hazard. But that's it. We get his arms and a bit of a side profile, but all the complications with what Vegapunk might have looked like with Kuma or with Caesar might not matter at all because of what we just found out last chapter. Vegapunk has implanted aspects of his personality into various robots that he has created. Any of the Vegapunks we've already seen in the narrative might not have actually been Dr. Vegapunk. Now I know that might sound a bit ridiculous, but what I'm getting at is it could have been Vegapunk number 1 or Vegapunk number 3. We haven't met any of these yet, and that could have simply been the Vegapunk that was at that specific event at that specific time. Vegapunk is a mystery. Therefore, he can look like anything in my opinion. However, I believe that he is based off of one very famous Japanese character. Oda is incredibly well known for basing some of his characters off of either other fictional characters or people from real life. And this even occurs with locations as well. Franky is Ace Ventura, Hawkins is Marilyn Manson. All the admirals are references to actors that Oda admired when he was a kid. So many people have been thinking about what Vegapunk might look like as a result. Maybe Vegapunk would be based off of a scientist from a video game or a manga. Him being based off a scientist from a video game would seem to make a lot more sense with some of the stuff we see in his lab. A massive video game controller and a literal Mario block. Maybe he's inspired by a real life scientist like Albert Einstein or Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin would make a lot of sense because he's evolving animals into robotic animals and making them better than they were before. Or maybe he's Rick Sanchez like every thumbnail ever has been saying for the past year. Let's go back to that point I made on the admirals. As I said, all the admirals are based off of actors that Oda admired when he was young, and the morals of the characters that these actors portray are oftentimes integrated into their One Piece doppelgangers. I bring this up to show that Oda not only inspires people based off of specific looks, but the role of that character might inspire the way that the character in One Piece's narrative goes as well. Oda has even integrated some other characters, who are supposed to be candidates for the role of Admiral, as other references to Japanese actors and actresses. I don't think that Vegapunk will have been a candidate for the Admiral position. However, I do think his appearance is based off of a Japanese actor, like every other Admiral. I just think this is a neat little connective tissue since the Admirals and Vegapunk work for the world government. So what exactly inspired me to turn this little headcanon of mine into a real theory? It all happened during chapter 1013, Anarchy in the BM, where Big Mom does this absolutely insane attack on Ulti with a combination of her homies called the Maser Cannon. When I first read this chapter, I was in genuine disbelief. Oda, who's been writing One Piece for such a long time, has finally referenced one of my favorite things ever, Godzilla. I've been a fan of the Godzilla franchise ever since I was a kid, so I always get psyched whenever there's a new series about giant monsters, or whenever something pays homage to the king of the kaiju. The Maser Cannon itself is a weapon created by the Japanese government in order to stop the advance of Godzilla. The weapon doesn't do much to stop Godzilla or any other kaiju's onslaught for that matter, but its presence shows a great leap forward in scientific prowess. Just in the last chapter, we've actually seen the inside of Vegapunk's lab, and it looks like the maser cannon would fit right in. The lab is covered with a bunch of wacky inventions. There's massive robots, machines that allow you to create food out of nothing, a literal giant kaiju that is probably based off of a banana gator. Wait, what? Oda finally references Godzilla with the maser cannon, over 1,000 chapters into One Piece's runtime, and we get our second reference to the series in just the next arc. If it wasn't obvious enough, the monster even breathes some beam attack, which might be Godzilla's most defining feature as a character. And if Dr. Vegapunk is based off of the character I think he's based off of, I can only imagine the Godzilla references skyrocketing as the series continues onward. Who is this man on the thumbnail? How does he relate to the Godzilla franchise? And how is he so important that he is the inspiration for Dr. Vegapunk? For those of you who are fans of the original Godzilla film, this should be all too obvious. Vegapunk is going to be inspired by Dr. Daisuke Serizawa, the man that defeated Godzilla. Well, the original Godzilla, I mean. When I think about how this theory started, it was all based off of a fun little headcanon of mine. I really like Godzilla, Vegapunk's a scientist, Godzilla has a really cool scientist, and it would be neat if Vegapunk, the scientist, was the actual eyepatch character that Oda was foreshadowing to this whole time, and not a pirate. I know this would go against what Oda said back in 2007, but hear me out. Vegapunk starts the final saga, and Lilith, one of Vegapunk's personality traits, is acting a lot like a pirate. I think there might be some connection there, not gonna lie. I think that Serizawa and Vegapunk have a lot more connected to each other than anyone ever realized before, than I ever realized before. I'm not gonna tell you what they are immediately, I'm gonna go point by point, but when we reach the end of it, I'm not only going to tell you why Serizawa and Vegapunk have the eye patch, but how the eye patch relates to Vegapunk's storyline, how the storylines of Serizawa and Vegapunk are connected to each other, and have the same linchpin connecting the two together. Hopefully, you find any of this interesting, because I've been thinking about this theory for such a long time, and it's only getting better with Egghead. So, I can't wait to see if this theory can be even better as the arc continues. A little bit of a heads up, Toho is really strict with copyright on Godzilla footage, so you're probably going to see a lot more of me talking to this webcam and having some photos pop up here or anywhere. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm going to have to do. Hopefully you still find the theory interesting, because I love this theory. This is the reason I started my channel. This is the reason I got into the One Piece community on YouTube, and how I've met so many people that I've talked to for over a year now, and it's been great. It's everything to me. So I am gonna do this even though I can't use clips. So let's get right into it. I know I really bigged up Dr. Serizawa at the start, literally introducing him as the man who defeated Godzilla, but I feel as though I can't just say that without getting into his actual character, which is what I think will be the thing that relates to Vegapunk the most. Now, if you haven't seen the original Godzilla movie, if you can watch that and then watch this theory, I think you'd have a much better experience. Especially so since I can't show the clips because of copyright, and you'd be watching a really good movie. So, if you're still here, I assume you are absolutely ready to get spoiled, and spoil I shall. Like I said, Serizawa is a scientist, and if you're curious about the eye patch immediately, he got that before the film during his time serving under the Japanese forces in World War II. Serizawa's research at the time of the film is focused on discovering a new element called micro-oxygen, which has the capability of literally eviscerating all life around it. He tests this out on fish, and it only leaves their bones. Serizawa is absolutely horrified by the realization that he has created this, and that other people might be able to use his weapon to hurt others. Now, I know what One Piece fans might be thinking. This is really similar to Franky's backstory, isn't it? Just put a pin in that idea, and I'll get back to it later, trust me. When Godzilla shows up killing people by the thousands, Serizawa is put into the ultimate crossroads. If he uses this bioweapon to kill Godzilla, he would be saving thousands and thousands of people. However, many people in the world would know that such a horrific weapon exists, try to go after Serizawa, and maybe torture him and brainwash him to ensure that they get their hands on this weapon. Yet if he just continues to do nothing, more and more bloodshed will happen, and he'll feel even worse knowing that he could have actually stopped it in the meantime. Does he save the world now but possibly doom the future later, or continue to let the people in the present suffer? Is this all worth it for the advancement of science in the first place? Serizawa is dead set on not using the weapon, even though he does wish that he could and hope the world would be better without it. But all of this changes when Serizawa sees a video that's being broadcasted all over Japan. Hundreds of children praying and singing for the hope that their loved ones will be able to ascend to heaven and be in a better place. It's truly a heart-wrenching scene. Serizawa then decides to go underwater, use the oxygen destroyer, and defeat Godzilla once and for all. However, knowing that many people in the world would try to use his knowledge, he decides to go out with the oxygen destroyer and Godzilla. Instead of possibly dooming the future, Serizawa realizes the only way he could preserve the future is to ensure that he is defeated along with the monster. Serizawa goes out not only as a hero, but as the thing that matters most in the world, being a compassionate human being. All the credit in the world goes to Akihiko Harada, who brought Dr. Serizawa to life and really knocked it out of the park. So now that I've given you a breakdown of Serizawa's character and his story arc, let's talk about how that relates to Dr. Vegapunk and how I think his arc will play out in One Piece. Already in One Piece, we've seen something about Vegapunk's character that directly relates back to Serizawa, his fondness for taking care of children. From the little that we actually do know about Vegapunk, this generosity, this kindness, this compassion is one of the most important things of his entire character, and it's been built up through the entirety of Punk Hazard with him taking care of the children that Caesar tortured. Serizawa is only motivated to use the oxygen destroyer because he sees the broadcast of the kids. Personally, I believe that Vegapunk's fondness towards childlike innocence started on his home island in Baltimore. Realizing how horrible the conditions were, he decided to help people with his inventions. And I believe that this childlike wonder is evident not only in all the people who still live on Baltimore, but also in Vegapunk's lab, which, like I said, is filled with all these wacky inventions, a lot of them looking just like toys in my opinion. However, this video was made before the reveal of what the SSG actually was, which puts us in a weird sort of gray area. Vegapunk doesn't mess with children, and he doesn't like to hurt children, yet the SSG are essentially child soldiers. But I don't believe that Vegapunk would make child soldiers willingly. We have to think about who exactly Vegapunk works for: the world government. Vegapunk has always been deemed as one of the beacons of hope in the One Piece world. Ironically enough though, the people he works for are seen as the Great Darkness in the One Piece world. They are a cruel, unstoppable force affecting people of all ages and races, even children. Robin, Law, Koala. These are just some of the characters we know that have suffered at the hands of the world government. So let's change the question around a bit. Do I think that Vegapunk actually did want to make these warlord clones? Absolutely. It's a fusion of the lineage factor and cloning, two things that he finds really interesting. But do I think the world government saw the potential of these clones and realized they could have made more of them if they waited until they were children rather than adults? Yes, yes I do. We've already seen them use child soldiers multiple times with Lucci, Jabra, and Bluno when they were training for Cypherpole, and in Mother Carmel's case where she would sell people to the world government. Godzilla also highlights the horrific things that children have to go through during times of warfare. Being forced out of their homes, surviving in tight spaces with people on their deathbed, losing friends and loved ones, and even possibly dying themselves. I know Godzilla might seem like it's a movie focused on a monster and special effects, but the film is deeply devoted to showing the horrors of what can happen to people struggling through times of war. We'll get back to why the kids are important to Vegapunk's narrative in the present time in just a bit, but first I want to talk about why Vegapunk would have the eye patch outside of being a reference to Dr. Serizawa. Oda has always been hesitant to give characters stereotypically pirate features. That is unless they play a pivotal role in the story or serve a narrative purpose for that character. Originally, I was going to give a bit of a spiel about Zeph and Crocodile, but if you're already this far into the video, I assume you've heard all that before. So I'm just going to go right into what I think will be important about the eye patch in Vegapunk's narrative. With the reveal of Vegapunk being not just one person but 6 people and being hidden somewhere on the island, it really gets me thinking about the isolationist aspect of this character. Vegapunk used to be a part of MADS, a group of scientists working to do something. We don't know anything about them really, but since then, Vegapunk has apparently been a lot harder to get a hold of, which seems kind of impossible with there being 6 of him. So this has me thinking, why exactly did Vegapunk make 6 versions of himself? Is it purely just so he can work on more things, or is there something more to it? Possibly relating to why he has the eye patch. I personally don't think there will be a connection between the way Serizawa got his eye patch, which was in war, and the way Vegapunk would get his eye patch, because Vegapunk, ever since he was a kid, was a gifted scientist. On that train of thought, I think that Vegapunk will get his eye injury from simply doing science, like a scientist would. Vegapunk getting the injury while working on science would have one thought run through his head. I'm a mortal human being, and I could die. I want to do so much more and help so many more people while I have the chance to do so, which would be the impetus for him dividing himself into 6 different bodies. I've never seen a scientist more dedicated to his work, I'm not gonna lie. However, when I see this situation, I can only think about the amount of stress and loneliness that Serizawa experienced as well. Perhaps Vegapunk made 6 versions of himself not only to get more stuff done, but because he knows he's the only person in the world he can talk to about the things he understands, just because he's that smart. This idea could quite possibly make Vegapunk one of the most interesting lonely scientist trope characters I've ever read about. Outside of MADS, he's been associated with almost no one except the world government, leaving them to his own toys. And this can be interpreted in the most literal way. Some of the Vegapunks that we've already met are children. Maybe Vegapunk wanted to let out his inner child and allow it to explore, while some other parts of him are more focused on work. I can't even imagine the stress that Vegapunk must be under, wanting to do so much when he doesn't have enough time, but now realizing he doesn't have the resources to do so, and also unknowingly being on the attack by CP0, another organization of the same group he works for. Whatever pod or bed Vegapunk is laying in, it's going to be a rude wake-up call for sure. On the topic of Kuma though, many people think that Vegapunk is already on the side of the Revolutionary Army, but I personally disagree with this opinion. In chapter 1062, Atlas, one of the newly known Vegapunks, says the following. There are endless ideas, but not enough resources. While it might seem weird that the world government isn't giving Vegapunk the money to make what he wants to make, it actually makes a lot of sense when we think about it. Why would the world government be placing money into things like an island aircon when they are trying to save face for being usurped by pirates all the time? They are primarily focused on military power, especially now that Sakazuki is in charge of the Marines. And it's the same story in Godzilla as well. Instead of nursing the wounded, helping rebuild, and even possibly studying Godzilla to find out how he was made and how to prevent this from happening once again in the future, the government is primarily focused on killing Godzilla over anything else. Kuma could have simply given Vegapunk the resources he needed to create things. This simple act of kindness from the renownedly gentle Kuma is tragically what led to him becoming a cyborg. It's only out of the kindness of Vegapunk's heart that he allowed Kuma to fulfill his final wish before being fully turned into a cyborg. Vegapunk is an incredibly compassionate person, but the world government has just run out of patience and want to get him out of the picture. So with that all out of the way, let's talk about what I think is going to happen with Vegapunk's endgame in One Piece and how he's going to end up at the end of the story. And if you're seeing who I'm comparing him to, you can probably pick up that it's not going to be the best outcome. Serizawa gave his all to save the world he loved, and I personally think that Vegapunk, being a moral person from what we've seen, will have a very similar outcome in the story. Even though I don't think Vegapunk is with the revolutionaries or aligned with the Straw Hats, I definitely think this will be the case by the end of the story. I could definitely see the Doctor giving Franky or Sanji some insights into technology they might not be aware of. Or maybe we'll learn what exactly devil fruits even are. The world government is ready to start a worldwide war to ensure that they remain in control, and Vegapunk realizing what they've done with the SSG might be the final straw. This realization will be the moment that Vegapunk in turn becomes a tragic character, just like Kuma and Serizawa. All the inventions that he's made in order to benefit science and the advancement of the world have been used by a government that would rather suppress others than take care of its own people. Serizawa realized that if he was to come back with the Oxygen Destroyer, he would have been manipulated by governments all over the world. Meanwhile, Vegapunk never had this realization and has been manipulated by the world government this entire time. Vegapunk might not even realize he's being manipulated by the world government because he's divided into 6 different trains of thought, and only when his personalities reconvene will he realize the terrible things that he's done by working with this group. But this is where Franky's flashback comes in. Franky has already gone through the exact same dilemma that Vegapunk would be going through in the present. The student becomes the teacher. Franky learned all of Vegapunk's blueprints from his lab, but Vegapunk has to learn about responsibility and accepting the things you create from Franky. In between the time leaving Mads and joining with the world government, something clearly must have happened to Dr. Vegapunk's mental state. Something has changed him from being purely a compassionate figure to someone who's very introverted and so work-focused that he had to divide himself into 6 different people. Although I don't think Vegapunk is going to let CP0 take him down like it's nothing, I believe he's going to sacrifice himself to save the Straw Hats and the revolutionaries Kuma and Bonnie. Seeing that this is One Piece we're talking about, I doubt he's going to actually die, but he's definitely going to sacrifice himself. But if this truly is based off of Dr. Serizawa, him dying and preserving knowledge that could be used to hurt other people in the future would by far be the best outcome for his character in One Piece. I'm not usually a fan of this type of Japanese wordplay stuff when it comes to theories. Daisuke is made up of these 2 characters, Dai and Suke. Dai meaning great, large, and important, and Suke meaning help and assist. How fitting is it that the greatest, most important scientist in the world could be inspired by a character whose name means great help? But I just thought that was kind of interesting, I'm not gonna lie. At this point, Vegapunk's true whereabouts are unknown to us. But Oda is clearly setting up the groundwork to reveal his true identity. And even though I don't know if Vegapunk is literally going to be Dr. Serizawa, I gave my case. I'd rather have him over Rick Sanchez or Doc Brown or Albert Einstein or anyone like that, because I think it would be a really cool direction to take his character and turn him into a really noble, cool character. But if I see Luffy do a King Kong gun on the Godzilla based creature, I'm not going to shut up for the rest of my life about this theory, just letting you know. Dr. Vegapunk is one of the most interesting characters in One Piece in my opinion. He's a total mystery, yet I feel as though with all the stuff I'm speculating on with Dr. Serizawa, I think it genuinely has a chance of happening, and if this is true, I'm incredibly interested to see what Oda does with his character moving forward. But if it's not based off Serizawa, then this video was all for nothing, and I'm just a fun Godzilla fanboy making a cool speculative video. What we've gotten from Egghead so far has had me in genuine disbelief, and I'm really excited to see how this arc continues onward and to see if this theory possibly comes true. I genuinely think that this has a real shot. It's not just some fun headcanon anymore. Both of them being compassionate doctors who care about children but are deeply dedicated to their work and introspective and are working for the government and are creating the most high-tech stuff in the entire world at that point. I feel as though there are quite a lot of similarities, and if the similarities are even deeper than that, I can't wait to see where this character goes, and I think genuinely he could be one of my favorites in the entire series, besides being literally Dr. Vegapunk. I just hope that if it is actually based off of Dr. Serizawa and Vegapunk does sacrifice himself, that it's actually him sacrificing himself. With what we're getting with CP0 right now, this could actually be possible, which has me even more excited, and I can't wait to see what happens next. This might have been the hardest video I've ever done, like genuinely. I've never edited a video more in my life. I wanted to be the most crisp and clear I could make it because I think this theory has some serious legs and I can't wait to see if it comes true. If you enjoyed, consider supporting the channel. It would be incredibly appreciated, and share this around. I really think this theory has potential, so if you could share it around, I'd love to know what you think and what other people think. Take care and have a good one.